Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Everyday Landscapes. I hope you guys are well. This is episode 4, and for me, this episode really puts the everyday into everyday landscapes. So, up until this point, I've been in and around the Charbonneau Clappers, and while it's only 5 minutes away from my house, it's still a very picturesque area. But today, well, actually, not today, it was more like several months ago, back in the autumn. But in this episode, I'm in a location which may be a little bit more familiar to some of you guys. And not the actual location itself, but the type of place I am. And for this episode, I'm stood in a park shooting a church. Now, there are hundreds of locations like this, I'd imagine, all over the UK. And although this one would never go into my portfolio, it's still important to try and hone your skills and get yourself a good shot from locations like this. So let's head over there now, and I'll see you back here in a minute. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Everyday Landscapes. Today I'm in the village of Barton-y-Clay, where I'm shooting the local church using my long lens. So I'm sure that you guys can relate to this actually, or many of you can relate to this. I'm just in a local park in my local village, and I'm just shooting the church, which is just through the trees over the back of the park here. I'm using the trees to kind of frame it. I'm only shooting the tower of the church because the rest of it is obscured. And there's some quite nice autumnal colour around at the moment. So I'm kind of trying to shoot those trees in their lovely colours and just get that church in the background with a bit of an interesting sky if I can. Now today what I'm doing is I'm using my 150 to 600 millimeter lens to actually take this shot. It's only at 150, which is all I need, but it's just slightly longer than anything I've got. So if you guys, for instance, have got something like a 70 to 200, then you're going to be in business here with this type of shot. So as you can see on the camera here, I've just hit record so you can see the composition I'm working with. I've got quite a nice tight crop here of the church, the tower, with this lovely birch tree on the right hand side with some lovely autumnal colours, and another tree that's quite large and dominant on the left hand side, and that's really framing that church really nicely. Now, I could have moved over and had the birch tree on the left hand side of the tower, but the problem then is that I would have to deal with these tennis courts that are on this wreck, and they would be very much in the frame. I have to do a lot of cloning to get rid of them. Now I'm probably going to have to do a little bit of cloning of them as it is, but it's only a small amount on the bottom right hand corner. So I'm just waiting for the light now, really, waiting for a little bit of sunlight, hopefully, to illuminate the scene, because it always looks better with a little bit of light on it. But as I'm waiting, the clouds are rolling across the back and they're looking really nice. So actually it should be quite a nice image. A couple of things as well to note. I've made sure that I've got the whole of the birch tree in down to the base, because I don't want to miss out any of that. I don't want to crop that off at the bottom. And I've also made sure that I've left a little bit of room above the left-hand tree at the top, so it isn't too tight in there as well. Basically, I've just been waiting for the sun to pop back out, and it's very briefly just appeared, so I've managed to get the shot. I'm just going to wait to see if it gets any stronger before going, but it's given me an opportunity actually to tweak the scene ever so slightly. So if I just stick the video on again so you can see, I've moved the everything over ever so slightly to the left, so there's more of the bigger tree in the frame now, and the tower is on the left hand third, and I think that makes for a more balanced image. So yeah, that's a good thing, benefit of waiting, I guess. But we're just waiting for that sun to pop out a bit more fully, get some real nice light on the scene, then we'll take the shot, and then we'll get it back and edit it. So here we are now back at the computer, and what a lovely day that was, by the way, at the back end of last year. Absolutely fantastic. Now, as I said earlier on, this image isn't going to be a portfolio image. It's not even going to be one that I will put on my Flickr feed, but it's still important to go out and do things like this, especially if you're strapped for time or you can't get to somewhere, too far flung or even that local. And you just want to get yourself a shot. Now, as I said, there's hundreds of these sort of images all over the country. There's lots of churches knocking about by parklands and bits and pieces like that. So if you can get a good shot of that, it might not be, like I said, a portfolio worthy image, but it's still important to practice your skills and practice your editing skills as much as your compositional skills and to see what you can pull out of it. So let's have a look at this image here. Now, one thing I will say is when I'm doing the video on location, it's shooting in 16:9. So some of you may have looked and gone, well, he's cropped the bottom of that tree off. But actually, in reality, I hadn't. It's just that, like I said, when you're shooting in that 16:9 video, it's cropping the top of the image and the bottom of the image off. So sometimes what I say might not make a lot of sense until we get it to this point. So here's the raw file for that image, and as you can see, it was shot at 180 millimeters, 1/80th of a second at f10. Now, the reason I shot it at f10 is because it's a long way away. I'm using my 150 to 600, shooting at 180 millimeters, and f10 was plenty enough of an aperture to get everything in focus that I wanted to get in. Now, this is the raw file that I chose for this image, and as you can see, there's plenty of data here. We're not clipping any of the blacks, and we're not clipping any of the highlights either. So it's quite a good file to work with. And I think going through all the images that I took, this is the one that had the most interesting sky. And even though you can't quite see it really that well, there is a little bit of light, a little bit of sunlight on the actual church tower. So this is the original raw file that I started from here. So the first thing I done, as always, was a little bit of cropping and some basic edits. So let's have a look at what's going on here. So basically, I've done a little bit of cropping. I've cropped in from the right hand side because there's not a lot of interest in that on that right hand side, and it looks a little bit unbalanced. And B, there's some horrific sensor spots, which I really wanted to get rid of by cropping out so I didn't have to deal with them, cloning them out. I've also taken a little bit off the top and a little bit off the bottom, but as you can see here, I haven't messed around really too much with the aspect ratio of the image. I kind of felt that this worked, and so that's where I cropped it initially. And then basically you've got these edits down the right hand side, as you can see, just some very basic edits, dropping the contrast and the highlights slightly, pushing the shadows up, pulling back the whites and pushing up the blacks. Now, what you sometimes find actually with images or with certain photographers, or many of us actually, but not in my case, is some people carry out a very prescribed set of edits at the beginning. So they might, for instance, drop the highlights all the way down, push the shadows all the way up. And I used to do this and then push the whites to the white point and pull the blacks down to the black point. But nowadays, I tend to find it's a much better process for me just to do each edit on an image by image basis. So here, these are the edits, the initial edits that I felt were working for this particular image. And so that's what I went with. And then the next thing I did was I used the sky selection tool in Lightroom, which is a fantastic tool, by the way, and then did some selective edits on the sky. So the first thing I did here was I used the healing tool and I got rid of all of the dust spots. Now, there is a method that I use to find those dust spots because sometimes they can be quite difficult to pick out, but we'll go through that in another video. But I got rid of all of those, and then let's have a look and see exactly what I did to selective edit on the sky. So I pushed the contrast up a little bit and I pulled the shadows down a little bit. And by the looks of things, that's pretty much all I did. But if you go from the before to the after, you can really see the difference that those small adjustments have made. So let's have a look at the before. And this is what it was like. So the sky there is detail in there, but you can't see it particularly well. And then if we go to the after, you can see the difference that that's actually made. So it's actually pulled out a lot more detail, and it's given it a lot more of well, it's actually emphasized the blue a little bit, I think, there as well. So just from doing that, it's pulled a lot out of the image. And for me, it's changed it quite significantly just by making a couple of subtle edits there. And then for me, this part of the edit was probably the most important part in terms of the overall picture, the overall image, the composition. What I did here was I wanted to draw your eye in and give you more of a focus on the tower itself, because essentially that tower is the focal point of the image. Now there was a little bit of sunlight on the day, not a lot, but a little bit, and I really wanted to emphasize that. So what I did here was I got an adjustment brush, and I made an adjustment simply to the tower itself, as you can see here. And those adjustments were basically a little bit of punch. So I added in some contrast, give it a bit more highlights, drop the shadows a bit, and then give it a bit more white. And then I added a couple of other brushes in as well, just in certain areas. And I pushed up the clarity and the texture. So essentially what that's done is it's made it brighter, it's made it sharper, it's made it more of the pull of the image. So if you look at it from before and after, you can hopefully see that before that everything is quite muted. It's quite soft, not soft in terms of the texture or the detail, but soft in terms of the color palette and the feel of it. And then just by adding those adjustments in, you can see that it's sharpened it up a bit, it's given it more punch, and it's made it more of the focal point of the image, which, you know, essentially, as I said before, is exactly what it is. And then following on from that, before I take it into Lightroom and just deal with this fence, I just had a look at it and decided I wanted to recrop it slightly. So if we go into this part here, you can see now that I've pulled it in a lot tighter. So there's less of the grass in the foreground. And then simply we went into Lightroom and used the Content Aware fill and some cloning just to get rid of that tennis court down in the bottom. And you know, the thing I always find with this is when you do it, when you remove it, you notice it a lot more. You notice maybe the imperfections or bits and pieces that you think probably don't look as good as you want them to look. But if you never knew that the tennis court was there in the first place, you wouldn't notice any different. You wouldn't think, oh, there was something there and it looks wrong. So, you know, when you're doing that sort of thing, when you're removing things out of the image, don't get too hung up on it. As long as it isn't absolutely obvious that there was something there. Usually people, if they didn't know that anything was there in the first place, they're not going to be drawn to it. And then it was on to the final part of the process, which then was a few final edits, because I always tend to just, when I get it back from Photoshop, have another look at it, see if I'm happy with it, see if there's anything else I want to add or take away or change. So we did that. So as you can see, I've cooled it down a little bit and I've done a few little edits to it, and I've also added a vignette. And, you know, even though I warmed it up previously, I decided that I wanted to go with it a little bit of a cooler image. And that's the thing for me. Editing is a very fluid process. It isn't just prescribed, you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this. It's very much on the go. So if I came back to this today and re-edited it, it probably wouldn't look anything like it does here, because I'd probably be in a different kind of mood and do a different kind of edit to, you know, to illustrate that mood that I'm in. Anyway, so that's all done. Let's have a look at the final image, and then I'll come back to you with a few final words. So there you have it, and I hope you've enjoyed this episode. You know, this is a much more, like I said, a real everyday landscape, and it's not something that I would ever consider going out and shooting normally. But because I'm doing this series, it's given me that chance to go and look at things differently, which I think is really important to hone your skills. Like I said, is it a portfolio image? No. Will it even go on my Flickr page? No. But I've still learnt some valuable lessons by going out there and trying to take this image. And that's what I'm trying to put across to you guys, you know, to get out there in your local area and, you know, get outside your comfort zone and try and take shots that are ordinary and try and make them a little bit less ordinary. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time with another Everyday Landscapes, and I really hope you've enjoyed it.